Hey, she's calling now. Hurry up and get in here, Reese, Darian Whitney called down the hallway. His and Reese's Mac sat on a cluttered desk in front of him. Camera lenses, batteries, and SD cards lay in messy piles everywhere he tried to put his elbows, so he hovered his arm over the mess as he centered the mouse cursor on the answer button. Reese started in with his hair neatly tucked beneath a baseball cap. You ran out of here for a hat? Darian asked. He clicked. Reese said, Yeah, dude, my hair was a mess. Who knows if this lady's gonna record us? The screen went black, then lit up with a bluish haze around a 30-ish-year-old woman's pinched face. You guys hear me? She asked. Yeah, can you hear us? Asked Reese. Sure do, she replied. Wow, I almost didn't recognize you in that hat, Reese. I can't believe I'm really talking to the Whitney brothers. The woman in the bluish haze, through which a messy bed could be seen behind her, was a prison guard at the Othan State Prison. She claimed the prison had been haunted ever since a particular prisoner arrived. After vetting her on Google and LinkedIn, the Whitney brothers decided to set up a call to judge whether her case might be worth investigating. Ever since their identity-shaking night at the Hotel Moss in New York, the brothers backed completely away from flippant investigations of popular haunted locations and even quit publishing most of their work publicly. They now lived off of unsolicited gifts from people they helped and a continuously supportive group of online followers who funded their efforts. For these supporters, the brothers occasionally posted videos when the subjects of the investigation gave them permission. Otherwise, they kept their work private. So here's the thing, said Darian. We've never done an investigation in a public place like, well, not public place, but do you know what I mean? Somewhere not just a house or an abandoned building, Reese clarified. Since the Hotel Moss, you mean? The guard asked. Her name was Melinda Wayne, and apparently she knew their old channel well. Reese raised his hands, palms up like, you got me. Darian said, It'll be the first one since we've gone private, and it won't be super easy to do because, I'm guessing we'll need permission to film and set up. Melinda said, Oh, sorry, you can't film at all. Not even the thermal cameras and stuff? Reese asked. No, definitely none of that, she replied. The brothers glanced at each other. Darian said, we might have a hard time pinpointing where... Melinda interrupted again. Darian, aren't you clairvoyant or something? Oh, great. She'd been down all the internet rabbit holes about the Whitney brothers. Somewhere over the past year, an anonymous viewer strung together a bunch of offhand remarks the brothers had made about Darian having a stronger connection to the paranormal, and the fans went wild with theories about what that might mean. Darian could not publicly address any of the rumors because, truthfully, he could not say whether any of them were definitely true or false. He himself did not yet comprehend his connection to the parallel world. He had seen it once, and he'd felt its pull at the hotel. But was his sensitivity to the other world what enabled him to see it, or had seeing it granted him the cursed gift? To Melinda, he said, no. Look, I might be sort of predisposed to paranormal contact, but we still have to use our gear to do our job. Well, hold on, Reese said. Melinda, in your message, you mentioned it seemed like all the activity at the prison started when a specific prisoner got there, yeah? Melinda replied, Yes, Uno Doe. That's sort of a nickname. He came in without any ID or documentation, and his story is... Well, I personally think he belongs in a mental institution, but we don't really have those anymore. The guy's completely insane. But anyway, yeah, he showed up right before all the weird stuff started happening. Literally on the day Uno got booked, my sergeant told us a weird story. Nobody believed him then, but now we're all a little more open-minded. What happened to your sergeant? Asked Darian. You guys know what an air plant is? They're little plants that people put in glass orbs that hang from the ceiling by a window or whatever. They're cute. His had these long, pointy leaves that all stuck out from a bulb in the middle. Pretty basic. The day Uno got booked, Sarge said he went to his office and found his plant laying on the floor by the window. The glass thing and all the shells and rocks and whatever were still hanging up, only the plant fell. Okay, so somebody bumped into it and didn't notice, is what he thinks. But he picks the thing up and goes to put it back, and the leaves are all splayed out and curved backwards, and now they're too wide to fit through the hole. Isn't that weird? Couldn't they have just flattened out when they fell? Asked Reese, finding Melinda Wayne more credulous than he'd hoped. Melinda shook her head. She suddenly pinched her eyebrows, reached for something off camera, then sat back as a bright light warmed her image, banishing the blue haze. Now the brothers could see her clearly, as well as the messy room behind her. "Sorry, didn't realize how dark it was in here," she said. "To answer your question, no, the leaves on his plant were super stiff. They felt like plastic. It was like the plant didn't want him to put it back." "Did he get it back in eventually?" asked Darian. "Yeah, with some gentle force he managed to put it back. But here's the thing. As he's telling this story, Mike, the kitchen supervisor, tells us he had something weird happen too. He said he went to get some fresh spinach out of the cooler and thought there were bugs in it because when he opened the lid, all the leaves were moving. He described it like they were sort of twitching, like insects were crawling around under them. So he dumps the spinach into the sink to rinse off the bugs and sees there aren't any. He rinses off the leaves anyway, and I guess they don't give him any problems. He said he thought he was crazy until he started scooping up the leaves to put them back in the container, and he could feel them wriggling in his hands. He said it was like holding a fistful of wet moths. "Nasty," Reese remarked. Then he asked, "I'm guessing you've already realized both those stories have leaves in them, right? What's the theory on the plant angle?" We don't really have one except, well, this is the super weird part." "Okay, we're all ears," said Darian, finding himself growing slightly impatient. Melinda adjusted her posture, then leaned close to the camera and lowered her voice. She appeared to be alone, but seemed worried about someone overhearing her. Reese suspected her of simply being dramatic. She said, "This guy, Uno, we call him that because the only name he would give us when he got booked was, it's pronounced like Kernunos. He writes it Cernunnos. "Kernunos?" Darian tried. "Yeah, you got it," said Melinda. "So that's part of his story. He claims to literally be this basically unknown Celtic god. I looked it up. But get this, Kernunos, the mythical Kernunos, is like a forest god. Basically, he controls plants. Isn't that weird?" The brothers shared a skeptical look before Reese asked, "Did you or any of the others know that before the, weird stuff started happening?" Melinda shook her head. "Look, I know why you guys are suspicious. I'm sure you get BS requests all the time and people just trying to get your attention, but I'm telling you this is real. Not to make myself sound even crazier, but I just get a vibe from this guy Uno. That's what we call him, that's short for Kernunos. Uno Doe because he's technically a John Doe in the system." Darian asked, "So you think this guy's actually got some kind of power?" "I think if you met him, you'd know what I mean." "Can we meet him?" asked Reese. "Well, therein lies the problem," replied Melissa. "See, it's our job to house this guy and keep him locked up, but it's not our job to investigate his case, Like, it's not our place to try to figure out who he really is. That's up to the investigators and stuff. But here's the thing. He won't talk to them at all. He's told me and some of the other guards he'll only talk to his daughter." "He has a kid?" Darian asked. "And we get deeper into the weird," said Melissa. "So, he's a John Doe. We don't know anything about his relatives or we would know more about him. But I dug into his case. He's here because he got convicted of a double kidnapping. He pled down a couple of assault charges. The kids he kidnapped, they were named Dennis and Leah Daniels. Cousins, not siblings. Leah, who's just recently turned 18, she's the one Uno thinks is his daughter." "Thinks?" asked Reese. "Well, yeah, there's no proof he's her dad, but get this. nobody knows who her dad actually is. Some guy who never got caught or identified assaulted her mom after a high school party in the woods almost 2 decades ago. Darian asked, "Why not get a genetic test?" "Both parties would have to agree to participate," replied Melinda. "At this point, that's unlikely." Darian said, "I'm guessing she doesn't want to meet him." "You're half right," said Melissa. "She won't meet him alone." Through the camera, she gave the brothers a knowing look. "What are you saying?" Reese asked. "I'm saying Leah and I have talked. I know it's not my job to get to the bottom of this, but things have been so weird at the prison that we've been banned from keeping plants in any indoor spaces. I took a huge risk and got in touch with Leah Daniels. Apparently her mom's been keeping her away from the case. But now that she's of legal age, she's a free agent. She's willing to meet with Uno, but only with you two specifically." "Us?" Darian asked. Reese said, "So she believes her dad, or this guy anyway, actually has something paranormal about him?" "Fully," said Melissa. "She's very afraid of him. But she's understandably curious too. She's in a weird place mentally." Reese asked, "If we agree to help, is that what you want us to do? Interview this guy Uno with his maybe daughter?" Melissa nodded. "She says she could meet you guys first. I'd love to make the introduction." Melinda obviously wanted to be part of the initial meeting between the Whitney brothers and Leah Daniels, and they expressed their gratitude to her for linking them, but made it clear their conversation needed to be private. Darian and Reese researched the Daniels kidnapping case and knew if they decided to wade into its murky waters, they would need to do so with care and caution. The information available to the public made it seem like a pretty open and shut case. The man now known as Uno Doe at Othan State Prison, snatched a boy named Dennis Daniels while the kid was helping his dad look for a remote control airplane in the woods. Through what the media called a hunch, Dennis's cousin Leah entered the woods from a different direction than the rest of the search team and found her cousin and his kidnapper. The man then let the boy go in exchange for Leah. According to the reports, the police discovered his hideout shortly thereafter and rescued Leah, apprehending the man after a brief skirmish. As for evidence of the paranormal, Reese discovered a Reddit post from an anonymous user claiming to be one of the arresting officers. He shared enough detail to earn tenuous credibility, though not quite in proportion with the weight of his claims. This officer wrote that during the process of capturing Uno, the trees around him interfered. And while on its own this claim seemed psychotic, when paired with Melinda Wayne's testimony from the prison, Reese could not write it off entirely. Over email, the Whitneys arranged to meet Leah at a coffee shop in her hometown. They arrived early, but Leah beat them there. Due to her being a minor at the time of the kidnappings, none of the media outlets included her photo in their reporting. Reese found a couple left over from social media accounts she deleted after her ordeal, but the young woman waiting for them outside the coffee shop that afternoon looked almost nothing like the girl in those pictures. She wore a navy blue baseball cap over hair that appeared to be trimmed short, but could have also been tucked inside. She wore no makeup, no glasses, nothing to make her stand out. She cloaked herself in a black hoodie and blue jeans. Everything about her appearance, so unremarkable it must have been intentional. Leah Daniels could have been anybody or nobody, but something about her harnessed Darian and Reese's attention even before they realized her identity. They both felt a subconscious suggestion that the woman before them would turn out to be someone of great importance. "Leah?" Darian asked. In a flat tone, she replied, "Darian and Reese. Yeah, I'm Leah. Sorry, I promise I'm excited to meet you. I'm just super tired." "Oh yeah?" asked Reese. Leah said, "Yeah, I don't sleep well very often." Glancing at the conveyor belt of downtown visitors and shoppers, Darian said, Do you want to go get a booth so we can talk?" Actually, said Leah, her undisclosing lips twisted into an awkward sort of frown, I hate to be like this, but could we go somewhere else instead? Where do you have in mind? Asked Reese. Leah looked west and pulled her baseball cap down a little further. She pointed discreetly, her hand never leaving her hip, and said, I was considering showing you guys where it all happened, if that sounds okay to you. Of course, said Darian. He thought he would have agreed to anything Leah Daniels requested. What was he feeling? A crush? Some kind of hormonal reaction disguised as love at first sight? No, those types of feelings could not compare with this one. He felt, as dramatic as it might sound, as if turning down any offer made by the young woman would be equivalent to turning his back on fate or destiny, if such a thing exists. Reese said, We parked around the corner. Should we go get our car and meet you somewhere? If it's all right by you, Leah said, we can actually walk there. Gibbons Park? Asked Darian. It was mentioned in the news articles about Leah, so he had noticed it when it appeared on the map when he searched for the coffee shop. It looked like a bit of a long walk, but as previously mentioned, Darian thought he would have done whatever she asked him to do in that moment. Reese apparently felt something similar because when Leah began leading the way, he followed her first. On their way to Gibbons Park, Leah recounted the kidnapping story from her perspective, filling in blanks the media either couldn't or wouldn't publish. For example, she claimed to have personally witnessed trees in the forest moving willfully before she came into contact with the man claiming to be a Celtic god and her father. By the time she reached the story's conclusion, the part where the police finally wrangled Uno into custody, the trio came to an intersection where a darker cement path diverged from the sidewalk. Leah led them down it. So let me ask you this, said Reese. Do you really think there's any chance Cernunnos is really your father? You can call him Uno like they do at the prison, replied Leah. I prefer that name, honestly. I think it gives him less power. They passed below some bare trees. The path beneath their feet halted, giving way to a desert of crisp, brown grass. Across the field stood a small playground with a wide hill behind it. Behind the hill stood a fortress of trees, gray and empty for the season, asleep, yet watchful. Darian said, So, hold on. It sounded like you believed in his powers a second ago, but you don't believe he's really Cernunnos? Leah gave him a rare smile and said, One question at a time. Okay, Reese, I guess it's complicated. Once we're in the woods, I'll explain. It's easier if I show you. And Darian, I believe he's super powerful. I think he took it easy on us in the woods that night. I really do. It bothers me because I don't understand why, but I think he only showed a fraction of what he can do. But do I believe he's an ancient god that originated halfway across the world? No. I've studied the Cernunnos myth a lot, as you can imagine. It's been hard because there's not much about him out there. Not much online, at least. Maybe the guy who attacked me and Dennis, maybe he's trying to understand his own powers, or maybe he's genuinely insane, but I don't think he's literally the god Cernunnos. That's why I'm perfectly content thinking of him as just Uno. They had almost reached the woods. Reese said, I know it's probably super uncomfortable to think about, but Melinda the guard said something about maybe taking a genetic test? Is that something you'd be open to? If it ends up being absolutely necessary, I'll think about it. Otherwise, hell no. I don't need the state knowing if we're related, and I don't need to put my mom through that. Plus, my Uncle Guy might actually try to kill him. No, I've got all the proof I need. Can you guys trust me? Yeah, Darian replied without thinking or referencing his brother's reaction. For this, he received nonverbal admonishment from Reese, but Reese responded the same. Okay, said Leah. Then follow me. Turning her back, she led them into the woods. Reese lingered a few trees behind Leah. Darian fell back to check in with him. You still good with this? he whispered to his brother. Reese said, "Yeah, man, but stay alert, okay? We started out talking to a prison guard and now we're following an 18-year-old into the woods. This doesn't feel like our typical kind of investigation." "Definitely not," Darian agreed. He considered keeping it inside, but decided to add, "I trust her, though. And tell me if you think I'm crazy. I think I believe her." Reese whispered back, "Yeah, I'm not sure why, but so do I." "Hey, guys," Leah called. "Right behind you," Darian yelled back. He and Reese nodded to each other, then trotted to catch her. She stopped in front of a tall, broken trunk which had split down the middle. The center was rotted out and hollow, but the tree's ancient roots ran deep enough to hold its remains upright. Leah said, "This is where I found Dennis and where I first met Uno. They were hiding in this hollow trunk. In the dark, I couldn't see either of them until they stepped out. Uno was so creepy. He looked like a skeleton with long hair, and his whole body was covered in mud. I probably don't have to tell you how bad he smelled either." Reese asked, "How long was he living out here? Do you know?" "Years, probably," said Leah. "Melinda probably told you the police can't get anything out of him. He pled guilty to the kidnapping charges, so the case just ended there. You know, once somebody's been sentenced, there's not much incentive to keep looking into them." "You need, like, a curious journalist or documentarian," said Reese. "Or a couple of ghost hunters," Darian joked, trying to elevate their group's heavy mood. Leah gave him another fleeting smile and said, "I think you're onto something. Come on, we only have a little bit further to go." Reese said, Hey, it looks like the sun's going to go down in an hour or so. Are we going to have enough time to walk back downtown?" "We're already on our way," Leah answered. She continued to lead them. "These woods sprawl all across the edge of town, and there's a part my uncle calls the Finger that juts into town a little bit. It ends right by the municipal field across from City Hall, which is only a couple of blocks away from the coffee shop we met at. I only took you this way because I thought it would be helpful to go through where my story happened." "It is," replied Darian. "But are you sure you know the way out?" Leah nodded. Darian thought he detected something solemn in the way she bobbed her head, like knowing the way burdened her somehow. Maybe she just had a lot on her mind. Reese asked, "Have you been back here since that night?" "Lots of times," said Leah. "It might sound crazy doing that to myself, but this place and what happened here completely changed me. Or, I guess it actually showed me my identity. I thought I was just a regular high school kid with an ugly past, but that's just who I was on the surface. Underneath, look, I still feel like me, but now I know there's more to me than I ever would have thought before that night." They followed her in silence for a few minutes. Through the naked treetops, the sky changed from bluish gray to hazy orange. Suddenly, Leah stopped. Darian and Reese caught up with her and saw she had crossed her arms over her chest, hugging herself, and had closed her eyes. "You okay?" Darian asked. Keeping her eyes closed, Leah said, "This is why I think Uno lived out here for a long time. I know I'm sounding crazy, trust me, but sometimes I think his spirit left a mark here. Can you feel it?" Darian felt outwardly with his own spirit, and he did think he sensed a tension vibrating up from the ground, but he could not be sure whether this sensation was authentic or imagined, prompted by Leah's insinuation. He said, "Maybe," and Leah nodded solemnly again. "This way." Leading them forward at a slight angle, Leah moved slower than before. Sometimes one of her hands extended slightly forward like she was petting an invisible dog at her side. Reese compared her new movements to that of a blind person. This idea provoked him to catch up to her and, matching her gait, he glanced over and found their guide quite literally leading them with their eyes shut. "How do you know where you're going?" he asked, looking back at Darian like, "Dude, you won't believe this." Leah replied, "The woods know where I want to go. It's them leading the way, not me." Reese stopped. Darian shrugged at him, but 2 steps later, he also stopped. He looked side to side, and Reese caught him lifting one of his own hands slightly, the same way he saw Leah doing. Neither brother said anything, but Leah turned sharply and opened her eyes wide, trained on Darian. He thought, though it could have been a shadow cast by a branch above, a murky cloud dispersed behind her corneas. "You feel it now," she said. Darian swallowed. "I do." Leah closed her eyes again, and they continued to follow her. "What do you feel?" Reese whispered to Darian. "It's a movement. It feels like a breeze, but there's no wind, right?" "I don't feel any," said Reese, tilting his head to expose the back of his neck and the sensitive little hairs there for confirmation. "But it's weird," continued Darian. "It feels like I'm standing on the wind. It's like a conveyor belt moving me along, but if I stop, it doesn't." "What if you close your eyes like her?" Reese asked, pointing at their guide wandering ahead. Darian said, "Okay, sure, let's test it. Hey Leah, hold up a second." "But we're basically there," she yelled back. Darian shouted, "I know, just a second though." To Reese, he explained, "I'm going to close my eyes, spin me around a few times, point me somewhere else, and let's see if I can still find my way to Leah." Leah opened her eyes and saw what was happening. She immediately understood. "Keep spinning," she yelled. "I'll stay quiet and hide behind this tree." She ducked behind a dense oak with her back against the bark, and there she saw it. The object she brought the famous ghost hunters to see, to feel. The thing most assuredly drawing Darian toward itself now. Reese caught Darian's arm to stop him. "Can you stand?" Darian answered, "Just a little dizzy. Just keep your hand on my arm for a second." A few seconds later, he pulled his arm away though. "Okay, I'm good. And I promise I'm squeezing my eyes shut right now hard enough to see stars." Reese's breath caught in his throat as he watched his brother hesitate halfway into his first step, draw the extended foot back, then plant it exactly in the direction of the tree hiding Leah. The other foot turned to mirror it. With the confidence of a man with open eyes, Darian Whitney walked a perfectly straight line until his toes scuffed one of the tree's protruding roots. "Don't trip," Reese shouted. Leah pivoted around the trunk to intercept Darian before he collided with it, but his eyes opened just as her hands slapped against his chest. "Sorry," they said in unison. Leah quickly looked away, and Darian blushed. Again, the feeling which blossomed in his chest didn't feel like attraction. Leah was still a teenager and looked like it, even in her urban camouflage. No, what he felt was beyond physical. More than a crush, but not infatuation. It was love. Not romantic love, or even the sort of love he felt for Reese. Is this what they call unconditional love? Darian wondered. The idea startled him. By now, the original reason for their trip to meet Leah Daniels, the interview with an imprisoned god, felt irrelevant. Melinda Wayne and whatever was going on at Othan State Prison were just the universe's tools to bring him and Leah together. And Reese, Darian thought. Why was his subconscious voice excluding his brother, his most trusted partner and friend? Leah's voice cut through his thoughts. Okay, guys, we're here. It's just around this tree. Behind the tree, a small clearing opened. No plants, not even grasses, grew in a roughly 60-foot circle. The ground looked poisoned, like nothing could possibly grow there ever again. In the very center of the clearing rested a large, flat stone, its top stained by something dark like rust or blood. Darian felt a convergence in the guiding motion. He trotted a semicircle around the edge of the clearing, sensing outwardly, and determined the natural flow would have led him to that rock from whichever direction he had entered the woods. There used to be a shack here, said Leah. This stone sat right in the middle, like a table. This is where Uno brought me and Dennis. It's where he called me his daughter and told me about his powers. Tried to get me to join him. What was that like to hear? Did you believe him? Was he convincing? Asked Reese. He probably didn't need to be, thought Darian. He found the supernatural draw near the stone impossible to ignore, and Leah seemed even more tuned in than he was. Surprisingly, Leah answered, "Not really. I just thought he was crazy. But also, I was terrified for my life and for my cousin. Back then, I didn't believe in anything supernatural anyway. I wasn't connected to this place yet. Afterwards, I started to notice plants responding to me, though. Like when I would brush past a closed flower, it would open up, or if I reached for a leaf, it would bend or its branch would stretch to my fingers. I couldn't do what Uno could do. I still can't, really. I started coming back here after they cleared away the crime scene and took down his shack, just kind of looking for answers. I think there's something about this stone that's like tied into Uno's power. I'm able to tap into it now. There's something inside me on my own, but it's amplified when I'm here. I can access it easier and use more of it." "Are you sure that's safe?" Darian asked like a concerned brother. "No," Leah responded, uncertain. Reese said, "If you don't mind me asking, what exactly can you do?" "Well, like I said, not much, but this is why I brought you here. I want you to see that this is real," said Leah. She backed away from them, toward the stone, and faced it. She leaned over it, placing her hands on its smooth top. "Wait," Darian said. The longer he stood near the stone, the more uneasy it made him. His feeling that the universe was guiding him now gone, he feared the stone's magnetic pull. "What's that dark stuff all over it?" he asked, though he felt almost certain he already knew. Leah confirmed, "Blood. This is where Uno used to sacrifice live animals. At least, I hope he only did animals. When he first brought me here, he had some in cages. I thought they were his food, and I think he probably did eat them sometimes, but the more time I spend here, the more I think he used them to, ingratiate himself with something beyond. I think Uno channels something way bigger than himself. I don't think I'll ever be as strong as him because I'm not willing to hurt and kill in order to build powers like his. For some reason, I have his gift, but he wants to control and dominate nature, and I just want to be, I don't know, its friend." With the brothers watching in silence, Leah climbed on top of the rock and laid down. The dried blood, though nothing more than a stain, nauseated Darian. His stomach lurched as he watched Leah lie down on top of it. "Stay there and stay still," she ordered them. "I'm not completely sure what's going to happen every time." "Is this a good idea?" Reese asked quietly to Darian. Darian shrugged. He thought he should say no, but he trusted Leah, potentially to a fault. Leah removed her baseball cap and set it on her chest. She shook her hair out and let it spill over the stone, running down the side, red like fresh blood. Then she closed her eyes. Darian felt the invisible motion halt. The sudden stop nearly knocked him off his feet. Then the motion reversed. Instead of pulling him toward the stone, it started pushing him away like a magnet facing its polar twin, though when he mentally separated himself from the force, he had no trouble standing still. The Whitneys stood shoulder to shoulder, watching Leah. The sun nearing the western horizon produced long shadows. The tree's branches cast stripes on Leah lying still upon the stone. Darian sensed Reese growing impatient. Before his brother could say anything which might distract Leah, Darian tapped Reese's elbow and subtly shook his head. Reese initially played confused, but couldn't withhold a smirk at how well his brother knew him. He rolled his eyes before turning them back to Leah. This time, it was he who tapped Darian, twice. He leaned toward him and whispered, "Look at the shadows." Darian felt again for the slightest breeze, but sensed none. He and Reese turned their eyes upward in unison. then took a few large steps back. "Is that her?" whispered Reese. "It's gotta be," Darian replied. The branches directly above Leah danced slowly in the still air. They moved in figure eights, occasionally clattering against one another, entangling, then unwinding themselves. Reese asked, "Should we wake her up?" "I'm awake," Leah responded. "Now keep it down." A dry bush near Darian shook. He spun around, sure something had just run out of the plant, but he didn't see anything. More bushes and grasses started to clatter and whisper. "Leah, are you in control of this?" Darian asked. He knew she was causing the unnerving animation, but he needed to know if she possessed a strong enough grasp on her powers to play with them this way. She was so young. Darian had witnessed firsthand how Gabby Pons, the only other person he knew to have supernatural abilities, used her powers conservatively and with great care. She respected her gift. What Leah was doing, yes, she probably felt the need to in order to convince him and Reese, but was it wise to let her continue now that they were thoroughly convinced? Stepping forward, Darian said, "I'm going to stop her." "Careful," warned Reese. At Leah's side, Darian looked up at the lively branches above. Now, instead of simply rattling back and forth, they flexed and bent like fingers and arms. The trunks around the edge of the clearing groaned. Darian looked around at them, then did a double take. He scanned all the way around the clearing, finding tiny eyes staring back at him from every direction. Squirrels perched on medium-high branches along with the occasional raccoon. A few chipmunks and even more squirrels clung directly to the trunks themselves. At ground level, Darian spotted rabbits, an opossum, either a groundhog or a beaver, Darian couldn't tell, a pair of red foxes, and a small family of deer which trotted cautiously into the clearing right next to Reese, then stopped, eyeing him. Reese backed away slowly toward Darian and Leah. "What do we do now?" he asked. Darian pursed his lips and grabbed one of Leah's arms. He was about to shake her back to reality when a sound made him pause. It sounded like the ocean, a steady beating of the tide against a sandy shore. He met Reese's eyes as they listened, then they turned their faces toward the sky. The sound swelled as the sky grew dark. From the west, the direction of the setting sun, not an ocean wave, but a wave of birds rushed upon them. Crows and sparrows, vultures and hawks, blackbirds, bluebirds, chickadees, pigeons, and even a bald eagle swarmed the treetops. The branches spread and adjusted to make room for them all, seeming to catch them one by one out of the sky. The birds landed in such great numbers they forced the squirrels and raccoons out. When those small mammals fled, they chased off smaller chipmunks and mice which had gathered on or near the trees. Once they all tucked their wings against their streamlined bodies, the birds went silent. They stared down at the Whitneys and their semi-conscious friend with 1,000 beady eyes. The trees went still beneath them. One of the deer suddenly yelped, pivoted in the air, and clambered away. Its family followed. The rabbits, mice, and squirrels darted off in all directions. The raccoons and possums waddled away low to the ground, and the beaver, now the brothers could see its tail, hid its jiggling body behind a wide tree. Only the birds remained in place, stationed safely above the ground as a chorus of howls went up around the clearing. Leah, oblivious, muttered faintly, "It feels stronger than usual." A coyote emerged directly across the clearing. "Leah," Reese whispered. Then more forcefully, "Leah, wake up." He looked for Darian to do something, but his brother appeared dazed. Really, Darian's mind was racing, both searching itself for the correct action and reaching out into the universe for some glimmer of Leah's spirit. He worried she was out there somewhere, adrift. But Reese, his eyes open to the world directly around them, pinched Darian to claim his attention. "They're everywhere, man," whispered Reese. "Don't coyotes usually leave people alone?" Moving as little as possible, Darian scanned the woods around them. Too many coyotes to count without effort stalked out of the trees, some with their heads low, some raised high, but every one of their merciless eyes met Darian's when he scanned them. He shook Leah gently and whispered her name, but Reese said, "She's not in control of this, man. It's time to get her out of here." "I don't think she's here right now," Darian replied. "What do you mean?" "I mean, her spirit—" One coyote stepped closer than the others. It raised its muzzle in a swooping motion, cracked open its maniacal jaw, and howled. The birds remained on their branches, watching, especially the vultures. Barely uttering audible sound, Reese said, "Dude, we don't have time. Help me lift her." Reese didn't wait for Darian's assistance, though. He scraped his hands against the bloody stone as he wormed them under Leah's back and legs and jerked himself backward, stumbling as he hoisted the unconscious woman. Sensing a vulnerable moment, the coyotes pounced. Many smaller birds finally took flight as the coyotes snarled and laughed and bared their stained, jagged teeth. Both brothers began screaming, shouting, and barking. They bared their own teeth, but they could not compete with the onslaught of victorious howling, the snapping teeth, the rushing fur. With their backs against the stone on which so many forest creatures had been sacrificed by a madman, they waited to become sacrifices themselves. Sacrifices given to the forest rather than stolen from it. In Reese's arms, Leah suddenly went stiff, then screamed, her voice cutting well above his and Darian's. The scream echoed off of the stone, reverberating like a shockwave, stalling the incoming predators. 24 coyotes all came to an immediate halt, but their greedy eyes stayed magnetized to the helpless young people in the clearing. Leah twisted out of Reese's arms and planted her feet beside the stone. With a fierce cry, almost a growl mimicking those coming from the coyotes, she slapped her hands onto the stone and pressed them down. One by one, she glared at each coyote and sent it scurrying back into the trees. Their distant chattering faded as the confused animals vanished to regroup somewhere far away. Leah collapsed. Reese and Darian each contributed a hand, and she bashfully accepted each of them. They pulled her to her feet, but she immediately pulled away and turned her back. Her shoulders bobbed as she began to cry. "Are you okay?" Darian asked. "Am I okay?" Leah replied, turning only her head slightly toward him. "I just almost got you both killed. Got all of us killed. I thought I was starting to get a grip on this power, but..." Now she turned fully and spoke directly to Darian. "What if Uno, if he really is my father, wasn't evil at first? What if whatever he's tapped into, whatever I'm tapped into, is what made him how he is, and what if it does the same thing to me?" Though she addressed this question to the more spiritually tuned brother, it was Reese who replied, "I think you get more of a say than that." Leah's eyes questioned him, so he said, "A while ago, you might already know, we investigated this old hotel in New York City." "The Hotel Moss," said Leah. The brothers nodded. Reese continued, "We learned something there about ourselves that's probably pretty similar to what you're dealing with now. Darian and I, we're the great-great-grandchildren of Orville Moss, who's one of the evilest men to ever walk the earth, and who also had a powerful link to the supernatural. It's most likely why I'm as sensitive as I am to this stuff," added Darian. "The powers I have are dormant from generations of being ignored, but I'm slowly learning them and trying to harness them. If I let the fact that my great-great-grandfather was evil affect me, I'd have to turn my back on all this stuff. I might even... I don't know if I could go on." "What he's saying is, the power isn't what's evil," Reese concluded. I'm not sure if I agree with that right now, Leah replied. She couldn't look at the brothers she had almost served up to a pack of coyotes. She had to look away and wipe her tears. Darian said, "It's the intention behind using it and what you use it for that matters. Leah, if Uno Do is your father, you're only one generation removed from his ability. It's way stronger in you than it is in me, and I don't feel like I have a handle on mine. Until you can really get a hold of your abilities, you need to be really careful." Leah whispered, "I know." Reese said, "Darian, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's the best idea for her to meet Uno. Not yet, anyway." Leah slowly nodded in agreement. She asked, "What am I supposed to do now, though?" "Well," said Reese, "you could start by leading us out of these woods and back to our car." The humor in his voice cracked a smile across Leah's face. She could not believe how calm and kind these brothers seemed mere moments after nearly getting torn apart. She reminded herself they had been in some tight spots before. Darian said, "After that, we're going to help you. I don't know what I expected to find out here, but it wasn't this. And it wasn't you. You shouldn't have to do this alone. You won't." Reese concurred. "Do what alone?" asked Leah. The Whitney brothers looked at each other, neither having a good answer. Finally, Darian said, "I guess we'll find out together." You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods, and if you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.